Good evening, everybody. Or I should say, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matty and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 31st, 1989. I'm a member of the East Naples Men's Group. We meet on Monday nights. We have a beginners meeting 6 to 7. Our home group is 7:30 to 8:30. We have a rotating format. I'm also a lifetime member of the Belford Clearview Group, which meets on Tuesday nights in Middletown, New Jersey. And it's great to be here. When I started, I asked, and if you wanted to, you could have. If you didn't, fine. For everybody that had a year or under to raise your hand. Okay, cool. Now, nobody's taking attendance, but who's been here all 5-6 weeks? Wow. That's awesome. Jimmy. That's great, guys. You get a pass, Cindy. You get a pass. That's awesome. That's awesome. See, I learned everything about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous by working with my sponsor and going through the big book in a time where a lot of people weren't doing any of that. And then more importantly, the 12 and 12. And we used to have meetings just on that. And I just wanted to start the meeting here to publicly announce, if you were at the Big Book seminar this weekend, I don't know how Pat has a voice left after the weekend, him and Bob Davis and Jason and Jen and Mary Bell, and I mean, tremendous. Some of us have been doing this for a minute, and without fail, you learn something new every time. It's a God-given spiritual thing that happens in that auditorium when these guys do this, and it's fellowship at its best. And Pat, awesome, thank you, Matt. You know, it was. I'm going through my notes. You know, we're a lot of guys we're on step 6, and some guys do 6 and 7 together, 8 and 9. I asked Jimmy what he wanted to do. He, this is before I was even critiqued. So he said, no, you can do all 12 weeks. So, we'll stretch it out, as they say, but there's so much information in 2 short paragraphs that will become your lifetime goal, right? And I was going back through my notes, and I think Braden said to me, I brought my book with me, and I was taking notes from these guys. So even though most of this stuff was written that I put in my book 35, 36 years ago, I was adding new stuff this weekend. But then I went back, and then I saw that something that Pat said on Zoom, April of 2020 in the Big Book seminar. Step 6 and 7, the pick and the shovel. All right, so we're going to do 6 tonight, the pick, and then next week, we'll do this. We'll do the shovel. That was when I saw that. That's pretty good. Just think about it. 6 and 7, the pick and the shovel. So, just to recap, who did their homework and who wants to raise their hand very quickly and tell me the principle behind step 6? Not you, Sheldon. 1 year, Rosie. Let me hear. Awesome. Great job. Awesome. I can never disappoint Clarissa, so I sent her the prayer earlier. And here's the prayer on willingness, ladies and gentlemen. And this is me talking to my Heavenly Father. I've shared many times. My faith is what saved my life. Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life, but it was my faith in God and the men and women that pointed me here, that rescued me. I was listening to O'Keefe today, and he talked about, and I'll bring that up a little. He said, a lot of people talk about being surrendered. He says, bullshit. I wasn't surrendered. I didn't surrender. I was captured. A lot of us are captured. Some come willingly, some don't. It doesn't make a difference. What makes the difference is who's here 5-6 weeks later. Who's here 5-6 weeks later with under a year sobriety. That's the key. That's the key. So here we are, prayer for willingness. And it's me again, I talk My belief, my faith is in the Holy Trinity, which is a loving Heavenly Father, his loving Son, Jesus Christ, and a beautiful and loving Holy Spirit, the Trinity. And I've said many, many times to thousands of men and women, I don't know if it was divinely inspired, but our slogan, ours, right, is the triangle. Look on the future fund there, right? The triangle, and a lot of times the perfect circle inside. So here's willingness, and it's me talking to my Heavenly Father. This is cool. It's like a poem almost. Dear Father, so often I come to you with lists and demands. Like a tornado, I spew them out, just like commands. To the next task, I move on with my day, completely missing what you might have to say. The noise of the world clogs my ears and clouds my mind with fog and fears. I need you to clear my senses, O Lord. Give me a heart in tune with your word. May I be ever eager to hear your voice. May listening continually be my choice. Willingness. The willing to listen and then put into action, right? I'm going to do a little bit more O'Keefe, but again, I was in the gym. I got my headphones on. I'm not listening to the Killers. I'm listening to Ray O'Keefe do Step 6. And he talked about, Johnny, would you read what Step 6 is for us?
Step 6 states we are entirely ready to have God remove all these defenses.
Lovely. Thank you, dear. And just to review, right, last week, fifth step I shared with you guys, and here's, again, the one direction like that Bill likes to give. So returning home, we find a place, we take the book off the shelf. That's provided you have two things. You have a shelf and you have a book. You take it off, and after an hour, you go over the first 5 proposals. And I shared with you guys my little funky story of near fisticuffs, me almost getting arrested 30 minutes after I had done my fifth step with my sponsor over a parking space, right? I shared that with you guys. See? Character defects. And then as Pat said after that, welcome to recovery. Step 5 is done, and then we go into step 6. Step 6. Move this. And go to the composition. Step 6. Now I share with you guys, when Ronnie and I were doing this work, we would name the steps, or we had our little thing. We had I guess you would call it a gag. It was a meme before there were memes, or GIF before there were GIFs. But we would name each one of the steps. Remember, I brought up meatloaf last week. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Well, this one, 1988, I wasn't a big fan, but one of the most popular groups was Boys to Men. I'm sober about a year, and they were on top of the charts. And that's what this step is. I spoke last week about in step 4, when I finished that list and spoke to another man about my columns and moved on, I was a man. I felt I was moving forward, and I was a man. And we went with that theme. We continue with that theme, from boys to men, right? And then the genius of Bill Wilson as to me, one of the world's greatest writers. But in the 12 and 12, when he opens up, he borrowed the line from Father Ed Dowling, right? Step 6, Jana read it. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. So declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of AA's greatest friends. Father Ed Dowling, non-alcoholic, was Bill's spiritual sponsor. Hobbled up the steps when Bill was laying in the upper room. Bill has no money. Him and Lois are in this little room upstairs. And here's Father Ed going up to talk to him about he was going to maybe take Bill to the task for robbing his ideas from the Jesuits, right? And where Bill got a lot of his things. And here Father Ed comes in and him and Bill sit down. Bill will talk, I'm laying in bed having one of my imaginary ulcers. See, Bill had defects of character his whole entire life. We all do. And then Father Ed, who would later as a non-alcoholic, was the guiding force in creating AA in St. Louis. I mean, just think of all the non-alcoholic men and women that cross our path that save our lives. Tremendous. You know, so he goes on to explain that any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults. Try repeatedly. You don't get it right away. Your defects are there for a lifetime. Has indeed come a long way spiritually, a promise, right? And therefore is entitled, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting there and I get to chill because of what my whole theme has been, 4, 5, and now here we are in 6. Has indeed come a long way spiritually and is therefore entitled to be called a man. And I'm like, whoa. Whoa, just like that, Jimmy. I got the goosebump now. Called a man who is now sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his creator. And then shortly into the next step, we're going to talk to that creator, right? In the 3rd step, he's God. And then in the 7th-step prayer, he's my creator. And then we would go all over, you know, if you do work in the big book, you know, if you're looking for the loophole, you're looking for the shortcut. I want one and done. Get this done. Let me move on. I'm busy. I got stuff I got to take care of. I got to get back to work. I'm thousands of dollars in debt. I need a car. I got to try to ease things over with my wife and kids. And he just said, slow down, slow down, slow down. I see after we finish 5 and then we go and you see that 6 and 7, 2 paragraphs. And like it's been said a lot. So in an hour, after I read that, I'm already at 8. I'm done. You know, it's like chutes and ladders. I just went here to there. And now, but it's not. It's the farthest thing from your mind if you think that you're done. There's no chutes and there's no ladders. There's ladders. There's 12 steps in each ladder, and we know what the first step is. So when we were writing this and I wrote it down and we were talking about it, and I wrote it wrong. I put we were, because I always put the name of our little pet name that we call it. I always have what the principle is on the other corner. I write the step. Then on this I put separates the men from the boys. And then I wrote we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And when he said that to me, there's no more we. It's me. I'm ready to do, this is me and God. God and I. There's no we. We finished that with that part right now. These are my defects of character. So take out the we, and here it is. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. How can I not look at that and not think of what I'm going to do? Right? The willingness and stuff to do that. And then he would say to me, are you ready? And I said, yes. But more importantly, are you entirely ready? And then he said, remember when we would jump back and you would admit your fault? What did I tell you? What did I say to you? What did you say to me? And I said, Ron, I'd admit anything to anybody just to move on. You want me to admit this? Yeah. Boom. But the difference between admit and accept. I can admit anything, but it's not until I accept it do things start to change. Admit and accept. And now we're jumping up. Now we've moved on, and those fresh things are in my mind. And here we are in step 6. We're entirely ready. Now, O'Keefe summed it up this way. You have to look at the difference between those two words. Entirely and ready. He said, I get up in the willingness, all right? I'm going to be willing, or am I going to be ready? O'Keefe would say, I get up in the morning and I'm willing to go to work, but am I ready to go to work? There's a big difference. That I could understand. I had to accept the readiness part of it, right? And then who did I have to speak to? I'm ready now to do what? To have God remove all these defects of character. And he will, if I stay focused. So now we've gone past that. I try to cheat on the 2 paragraphs. We're going through that, and we go right into the 12 and 12. And then he points out to me, or I pointed out to him, and I counted the lines and the sentences. So the big book, the 12 and 12 comes out 13 years after April of 1939 when the big book came out. So 13 years later, the 12 and 12, one of the greatest things ever written, comes out. And for step 6 in the big book, there's 6 lines. 6 lines, 4 sentences. I went, wow, the power behind 4 sentences. Then we went right into the 12 and 12. And again, am I willing? God bless Don Fusick, wherever he might be tonight. Are you willing was his catchphrase, right? Are you willing? Because willingness and honesty is the key. Has to be the key. I have to go into this work without any reservations at all. I need to, my house is getting clean, right? I told you about my Hazel expeditions and house cleaning and all those things there. So what do I have to do? I asked my God. I asked him to please give me release from this obsession to drink. And that was in the first 3 steps, right? First 3 steps to triage, you're stopping the bleeding. The bleeding is stopped. I'm asking him, please, I don't want this life. I don't want to go back there. I don't want to be that man who I was. Please, stop the bleeding. And he does. He always does. The bleeding is stopped. Step 4, we go upstairs to the private room. Welcome to recovery, right? And then it starts. And then I'll ask him, and I've already asked him that obsession has left. And I shared this with Ron, right? I'm a few months in now. I'm on step 6. Guess what? My job, I got it back. People in the program helped me. I had 3 DUIs. In Jersey, we call them DWIs. The 3rd was pending. So there was some wiggle room there. And men and women in my home group knew a lawyer, and the next thing you know, some paperwork was written. You used to have to go and get a card. And the chairperson would sign the card, and I'm sending these in. And through them, it's more 9th step stuff, but you reach out and put some stuff on a piece of paper as you're doing your inventory, and your life changes. The state of New Jersey saw that I was on the right path. I was turning these cards in, and they gave me back my driving privilege, as I remind my kids and my grandkids. It's a privilege, right? And I got it back. How does that happen? How does that happen? It happens because now I am willing to change my life. But prior to that, as this obsession was starting to leave, and I would meet him 2-3 nights a week. It's like Woodstock. If I could
Stay away from the purple.
Do I have to use this? I just lost my. Can we turn this off? I can talk pretty loud. Can everybody hear me? You guys hear me in the back? Krista, raise your hand. You're a teacher. Can you hear me? Good. So, then I can sit like this.
I still need you on this microphone so that people on Zoom can hear you. Matt.
So, again, I lost my train of thought. Thank you. Here we go.
You see him
Obsession. Obsession. Right, obsession. I'm coming in like that. So I go to him and I said, I'm back. My job is coming back. I'm starting to pay off some of my debts. I owed drug dealers. I owed bookmakers, everything. And I'm chipping away. I'm chipping away because I had a plan. And God was the force in that plan. But sometimes the obsession would come in and I'm working and my boss is very happy with what I'm doing. I was pretty good at what I did when I was there. And I worked in, as you guys know, on Broadway shows in Manhattan, and I lived across the Hudson River in New Jersey. And I would have to I had no license yet, right? So I'd be taking either one of the little trolleys or the bus through the Lincoln Tunnel to get back home. And where my bus stop was right by Max's Briefcase Pub, is where the end of my drinking was, Max's Briefcase Pub. You know, remember I shared with you guys, I was one of the few VIPs. Max's Briefcase Pub was a long, long bar, but the bathroom was in the Port Authority like 500 feet away. But if you were a regular and you were one of the VIPs, they let you go in the back room and pee in the drain on the floor. That was like when I went to Studio 54 and they would pull back the velvet rope. It was the same kind of perk. Didn't have to walk that 500 feet. Sugar-coated, delusional, alcoholic thinking, right? So I would say to Ron, I said, you know, every time I put the day's work in, I'm going home. I can't wait to get home and see my wife and kids most nights, right? And I'm walking through the Port Authority, and Max's is calling me. Matty, we missed you. Come on in. Your stool is still where it is, right? Everybody had their own stool, right? Your stool is empty. It's right there. And I would say to him, Ron, I'm afraid one night I'm going to do it. And he said to me, you're a pretty bright guy, right? Here we go. I said, yes, I am. And he said, if I recall being in there, Max's Briefcase Pub is on the 8th Avenue end of the Port Authority. Your bus is on the 9th Avenue end of Port Authority. So why don't you walk down 9th Avenue and go upstairs and go right to your bus? You don't have to walk past Max's Briefcase Pub. Genius. Genius. So I said, man, now I know why I picked you to be my sponsor. Genius. Again, things that you learn, that's why you do the work with a sponsor. You do the work with a sponsor. And that's what it was when we got to this part of 6. And many nights on my way home, I would ask God, please give me that release. And he did. I'm going to jump into the, most of tonight's stuff is going to be, or the rest of it will be on step 6. You know, and here's what happens, right? I'm sure most of you in this audience tonight, ladies and gentlemen, are going to be able to understand this because this is what we do. When men and women pour so much alcohol into themselves that they destroy their lives, they commit a most unnatural act. Instincts warped and gone wild. Defying all their instinctive desires for self-preservation, they seem bent upon self-destruction. They work against their own deepest instinct as they are humbled by the terrific beating administered by alcohol. Man, never mind Mr. Brown getting his ass kicked. This kicks your butt. Just think of those words. The beating, the terrible beating that most of us take getting there. But like Bill always wrote, and what God always did, there's the promise. And here's the promise. The grace of God can enter them and expel their obsession. Here, their powerful instinct to live can cooperate fully with their Creator's desire to give them what? A new life. For nature and God alike abhor suicide. Now, did I ever think of ending my life? Maybe the thought would come, but never. But the lifestyle that we live, and especially now, what goes on nowadays with stuff that's in, with fentanyl and everything else that's in everything, you take your life in your hands every time that it's going to be maybe one more shot, maybe one more drink. And for a lot of us, nature and God, because you're killing yourself. Ron and I would talk, and he would remind me, my God, when I'm talking to him directly, he reminds me that he doesn't design us. He didn't design man to destroy himself, just like what we read there. He gave men those basic instincts to stay alive. Staying alive, staying alive. John Travolta and the Bee Gees, baby. Staying alive. And what happens? When I decide I'm going to stay alive, my character starts to build. I had no character. I was a character, that's for sure. I would lie, I've said many times, I would look you right in the face and lie to you, dead on, and get away with it, and feel no twinge, no nothing. It was more like a yes than a no. You know, you would do that there. This is the most important part, step 6 for all of us, 6 and 7, but we're only talking about 6 tonight. It's a lifetime job. I haven't ever shared this story, and I don't know why it came to me, but it does, and these things, because I've shared with you many times. When I got here, I was like Sybil. I had 18 voices in my head. Now they're down to 3. One of them's mine. One I can handle, and the other one I just let run wild. So, that's the one that you walk into a room and what am I doing here? And then, oh, look at that over there. And, oh, wait, let me clean this, those voices there, right? But they've calmed down. So what have we got to be? And this thought came in. I'm talking about these defects of character. And it was something that I missed on my 5th step. So a couple of years back, one of my boyhood friends, his dad passed. So I went home and it was summertime. And we all went to 8th grade together. That's how long ago this was. And we all went out afterwards. And there was this girl, Ann, not going to use her last name. She ended up married one of my friends who lived down the block from where I grew up. But in 8th grade, she was the love of my life, my first big crush. And we had the St. Luke's Fair was in our football field at our church parish. And I asked her to go to the carnival with me. And she said yes. But that was the best part. See, but the bad part is I had no money. I had no money. But then I remembered, up in my father's closet, he used to save silver dollars, Kennedy half dollars, all silver in these little Smuckers jelly jars. And I climbed up and took them. Now, me and Ann go to the carnival, and it's like she let me hold her hand. Oh, man. Right? This is now 8th grade summer. That next summer would be the gymnasium where my alcoholic drinking started. But I'm remembering that. And then when I came home, my sister saw some of the coins that I had left over. And I'm going to tell Dad. And I begged her, please. And we're talking about this whole thing. And Ann brought up that story. Matty, do you remember when you took me to 8th grade carnival? And it was like, wow. And we completely forgot. My dad had long since passed about that it meant, what I was willing to do to please myself at 13 years old. And then one of the other guys who was one of my roommates said, hey, Matty, you remember what George, her brother, did to you? No. So what happened, they lived in a big house in the next town over, and George was the local pot dealer. And there's a big party in their house, and I wander through, and I go into his room, and there's a bale of hay, a pot there. So I helped myself to a couple ounces. put it away, and I had a plan. I'm not going to do it right away, but in a couple weeks, I'll break it out. All my friends will know how cool I am, and everything was that. I go in with that. The word got out, and George is looking for me, and he finds me. And I forgot all about this. George throws me in the trunk of his car, and they drive me into the woods. Right hand of God. They tie me to a tree. You can imagine, as O'Keefe talks about fear and terror, I was terrified. I mean, I knew him, but I didn't know him. And he says, you think you're going to steal from me? And they left me in this tree, and they left for hours. Then I came to find out there was a couple guys, they had beer in the back, and they were watching me, laughing their ass off. Right? So here, I brought that up, those two things, because our defects of character will remain with me a lifetime. Remain with me a lifetime. I wasn't able to make amends to my dad for that. You know? George wasn't on my amends list for stealing his 2 ounces of pot. I think I went through that, but lifetime character defects. Lifetime character defects. And it goes, no matter how far we have progressed, sometimes these desires will always be found. But then Ron would remind you, what also is found? If I look for it harder than that, again, it's the grace of God. God's grace is given to me. I don't deserve it. It's unmerited, but he gives me that grace. The most important thing when we were doing step 6, and we had gone through everything in 5, and he said to me, delay is dangerous. You have to start looking at these. They will be removed from you in your time, in God's time. He said, always remember, it's God's time. And then this is a great part of the little red book. We came before God as offenders. O-F-F-E-N-D-E-R, an offender. We offered no alibis. We had no defense against the first drink. I'm riddled with these character defects. Please help me. Please help me. Ed Webster writes this on he has 6 and 7 together. But this is what he talks about there. Pardon me. Here it is. We find the consumption of these steps, and it's 6 and 7, but we'll talk about 6, as a new peace of mind. You're at peace. A release from tension and anxiety, because we are now laying our misconception of our defects. What I thought really wasn't that bad, really was. We laid them on God's hands, asking him to rid them from our lives. We start to exert our own mental cooperation with God alone. We feel, and here's the mention that all of 7 will be about. We feel an intense humility that cries out for recognition and divine help. It's there if you ask. Divine help, mercy, unwarranted to most of us. I belong to back in, I guess it was maybe 1990, we had a Drop the Rock meeting started. So I brought the full library tonight. This is Drop the Rock, all about steps 6 and 7. We're going to do 3 prayers tonight. We already did the 1. Clarissa, you already got it. And here's what that was in. Bill P. wrote. Bill I think he wrote 30-something books on alcoholic recovery. Tremendous guy. Died young, 60 years old. Died unexpectedly. But the usefulness prayer. God, help me today to find balance between my character defects and the principles of our program, so I can be useful to you, to myself, and to others. You, the God of my understanding. How cool is that? Now, if you've ever read Drop the Rock, going to finish with this. Drop the Rock has some great stories on steps 6 and 7. But one of the main characters is Mary. Good old Mary. And so here's the intro for Drop the Rock. So quickly, I'll run through this. It seems, ladies and gentlemen, that there was a group of these happy 12-step members taking a boat ride to the island called Serenity. And it was a truly happy place and a happy bunch of people. And as the boat pulled away from the dock, a few on the board noticed Mary running down the street trying to catch up with the boat. One member said, "Darn, Mary's missed the boat." Another one said, "Maybe not. Come on, Mary, jump in the water. Swim, swim. You can make it. You can catch up with us." So Mary jumps into the water, starts swimming for all she was worth. She swam for quite a while, then she started to sink. The members on board, now all aware that Mary was struggling, shouted, "Come on, Mary, don't give up. Drop the rock." With that encouragement, Mary started swimming faster again, only to start sinking again shortly thereafter. She was going under when she heard all those voices shouting to her, "Mary, drop the rock. Let go. Drop the rock." The rock is this, ladies and gentlemen. Resentments, fear, dishonesty, self-pity, intolerance, and anger. That's what forms that volcanic rock that we have, that Mary had around her neck. She cuts the strings, the rock falls to the bottom, and she's free. She let go. Here's Mary's explanation. "Once I'm free of the rock, I was amazed how easy it was to swim," and she caught up to the boat. You know, we do steps 6 and 7, but especially 6, to be free from that. We drop the rock. We swim. I worked with these two new guys at once 10 years ago, and I have this in here, March of 2015. And we were they were smart Alex. They thought they knew it all kind of thing. And I just let them go. Show me. Make believe you live in Missouri. You can tell me everything. Show me. Show me what you got. And they're knocking off their character defects, this and that. God's going to take them away. Oh, it's only the 7 deadly sins. This is before I added my 3 S's. So then one day as we're working, I'm in the 24-hour book, November 26th, in the 24-hour book. And they're talking about defects to recognize. And where do you hear this stuff? I'm going to run through them quick because you're all going to get crazed. Defects to recognize: fear, resentment, inferiority complex, negative points of view, self-centeredness, criticism of others, oversensitivity, inner conflicts, the habits of procrastination, undisciplined sex, wasting money, boredom, false perfectionism, jealousy, and envy of others. So if the Paggles weren't enough for you, well, here's another list that if you want to really start to look at your stuff, there it is for you. Who likes to look at that? But it's the lifestyle that most of us live. And today I don't live that way anymore. By God's grace. By God's grace. We've recovered, but it doesn't mean we are perfect. Remember, we talked a little bit about step 1, and step 1 is not the perfect step. We talked about that. John always brings that up. You know, step 1 tells me I'll drink again. The only thing about step 1 that's 100% is my admission. Again, there's the word. There's key words that you'll pick up on all the steps coming in. And for me, they've always been admit and accept. Entirely ready. Because sometimes just the simplest things broken down are the easiest things for me to remember. Step 6, with that classic, opening line, separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls. Even in Drop the Rock, Bill P says, I'm going to adjust it because it's a pretty sexist remark, men from the boys. So he included the women, which we all do. And that's the difference for me today, recognizing those defects of character. Who I once was, I am not today. The man that I humbly asked God to become, I'm well on my way. But I have work to do still. You know, my whole theme again, 4 to 5, and now into 6. I once was a child, right? Now it was time to put away childish things. 1 Corinthians, we went through that. We went through 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Me and Meatloaf were growing up together. You know, we did Boys to Men. Now I'm a man. So when I was leaving tonight, I said, you know what, I'm going to throw this in. I already mentioned it a couple weeks ago. But here it is. It's the last verse of Rudyard Kipling. You guys know how much I love it. And I was talking about being a man. I've shared this with you guys. When I was 17, my dad gave me the framed copy of this poem. I then gave it to my oldest son. He's given it to his son, and I've given it to my grandsons. I gave it to the son I lost. Somewhere, it's somewhere. And here's the last verse. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of a distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Love you guys. Thank you.